There's only one way now. Further up and further in.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice. Tumbling down the rabbit hole?
You could say that.
I can see it in your eyes. You have the look of a man who accepts what he sees because he is expecting to wake up. Welcome, everybody. This is Team Rabbit Hole Edition 310 with Chris Knowles, Empire of the Secret Sun. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you. Glad
What's
to be
up,
here.
man? Yeah, I mean, I kind of coined that term because of something I wrote in the blip. I don't know if you're into the band Empire of the Sun, but they have a song called Walking on a Dream. In any event, wrote a little blip, and then we can start geeking out. Basically, Empire of the Secret Sun with Chris Knowles, episode 310, OG Synchromystic, Esoteric aficionado, blogger, Cancerian. Join the team as we get to know Chris and explore some of the deeper rabbit holes modern media, politics, and the internet have to offer. Walking on a tinfoil wet dream. So thank you for coming and gracing us with your time. Before we start really getting into like how I became aware of you stuff, I should say what we do typically is pull cards on the beginning of this stuff. And I've already pulled a card, trying to juggle multiple things. The Queen of Cups, which is always a hot tamale. This deck is from the David D'Angelis Starman Tarot deck. He's been on a few times. He's got cool shit. Used to work with David Bowie. Anyway, the Queen of Cups for this episode. I am a conduit for powerful love, the watery part of water, open to sensuality, seeking desires and pleasures, rich empathy, creativity, and understanding. So, is there anything that syncs up with this card for y'all today? I'm just wondering. If not, that's okay.
Well, it's a lovely sentiment.
You are a Cancer, so you're very watery.
So I'm very watery.
Yeah, you got a Jupiter conjunct your sun, so I mean you're super domestic. You're on nanny duty with the dogs, etc. And in this card, this lady's got her like there's obviously like kind of a fractalization or whatever, kind of like a dandelion. You blow the things out, make a wish. She's got her legs open. I mean, it's basically just like submit to the flow and enjoy the ride kind of thing.
Wait, what's that deck called again?
This is the Starman Tarot deck. It's by David D'Angelis. He's got a new one coming out soon. But it's the David Bowie Starman Tarot deck. It's really cool. Great art.
Nice.
Nice. Super esoteric. In any event, long story short, I think I turned on to you, and this is one of those things where memory, I mean, Bernstein Bear, simulation shit. I'm pretty sure about 10 or 15 years ago when I started really waking up around 2012, I was getting into the Sync book. So people like Alan Abadesi Green, and David Charles Plate, and just people like that. And I'm pretty sure one of them turned me on to you. So I started reading your blog, and I was eating a lot of acid at the time. And I was just like, man, this guy really thinks a lot about this chick from the Cocteau Twins, but he's saying a whole lot that's cool too. So I turn on to you in a weird way. And then it's not like I'm sitting there like eating your blog all day, but every time I look at it, I'm like, holy shit, this is amazing. And hence me being like, bro, you got to come on the podcast. So I'm almost like this somebody who's like, here's the choir singing in the church, but I'm outside, kind of be like, what the fuck are they singing about? So that's just an awareness, and I don't know how much Raphael's aware of you personally. I think he checked out your recent Philip K. Dick.
I actually was not aware of you. All I know about the Queen of Cups is the 38-11-2. So we have the High Priestess as well. And honestly, most of what you said, first it was cool to hear someone talk about Philip K. Dick, because I knew he existed through Jim, but I didn't really know much about him. So that was interesting. Also, these Cocteau Twins, maybe because I'm not American, I had never heard about.
They're Scottish,
and
I think.
Much of it went over my head, I'm sure, but it was pretty interesting. All these correlations that you made, very interesting. And I'd recommend anyone interested in these topics to check out this, I guess, one of the most recent presentations. Maybe you want to mention the channel on which you're publishing those, because it seems there's quite a few presentations there.
That's not my channel. That's Miguel's. That's Miguel's channel, Aeon Byte. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
you can interrupt, man.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
that's Miguel's channel. I had done Astronosis at the Theosophical Society. 2 years, and then before that we did it in Cancun, which was kind of awesome.
Going tropical.
There's not gonna be one this year, but next year I'm planning to pick up the cudgel and see where it can go, because it's a lot of work, and I understand that Miguel doesn't want to have to put himself through it. He's got a lot of book projects that he's working on. He's got his Elvis book. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but
I'm not. So before we start geeking out on Miguel and the whole place where you're at now, because I'm like, Jesus Christ, I just fell into like trigonometry, and I'm like, let's talk about like what numbers are first. So we don't have to go hardcore deep if you don't want to, but basically, tell us a little about how, the culture growing up. You were born in Boston. You're an East Coast guy, I think. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, born in Jersey. So, and I actually lived in Basking Ridge at some point as a kid. So I thought that was kind of funny.
Oh my God, are you kidding me?
No. And
Wow.
White House Station and like random places like that.
White House Station, yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us
a little about yourself and, from single cell to organism. How did you get to where art?
Well, it started when a man and a woman fell in love, and
conceived of by the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. No, well, actually from Quincy, which is right outside, it's right next to Boston.
Word.
Grew up in a town called Braintree, which is basically run by the mafia, which is kind of interesting because there's a lot of rackets going on and a lot of corruption. And it kind of gave me a feet first immersion into the world of conspiracy in a non-theoretical way, because there were so many things going on in that town that were just crazy. Got involved in the hardcore scene. Well, my mother was a nightclub singer, so I grew up in nightclubs and everything. And then
that's a unique position. I mean, you just brush over that. It's like, that's not a typical mammalian experience. So any highlights, lowlights? I mean, were you like, oh, disco's cool? Or when you said hardcore scene? Well,
I grew up in nightclubs. My earliest memories are like playing with my little Hot Wheels on the floor of this one, talk about the mafia, this place that was run by the Irish mob called Coral Gables. It was an interesting experience, but it wasn't like the healthiest way to grow up. Growing up in that kind of environment isn't necessarily conducive to positive mental health outcomes, I guess you would say.
It's kind of the shadow side of the Queen of Cups. It's like anything goes, drinks on the house, and it's like, holy shit. Like,
yeah. So I grew up in nightclubs. She quit doing that. How old was I when she quit doing that? Oh gosh, I don't even remember. Maybe like 12 or 13. But she was also she was a musical prodigy. So she started playing like the church organ professionally when she was 14. So had a lot of religion. I had this really bifurcated schizophrenic upbringing where it was like half like, the nightclubs and the mafia and all the rest of it. And then half of it was like church, it was like very confused. So that was my upbringing. And then like I said, I got involved in the hardcore scene, was involved in comics fandom from a very early age.
When you say hardcore, you mean like punk rock, or what do you mean?
Hardcore punk, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So like there's a guy who's an Aquarius. Oh God, it's Black Flag singer. I'm forgetting his name now.
Henry Rollins.
Yeah. So that kind of stuff, or not?
Yeah, but we all thought he was a poser. So
oh shit, we won't tell Henry. He takes it pretty seriously. I think he's like, but goddamn Aquarius, I know what's up. He's a crazy dude. But okay, so do you like Danzig? I mean, I'm trying to think like what.
Well, I hung out with Danzig one time.
Oh shit!
Back before he started getting into the bodybuilding, and he was just this little scrawny comics geek,
right?
And I went to see the Misfits with this. Well, I guess he's in the Misfits again, but I saw the Misfits in 1983, maybe. And I was, just started hanging out with him. I don't even know how it came up, but we were just like totally geeking out on comics because he was super hardcore about it. And he knew everything that I knew. Like we were just like zoning out.
So like Marvel comics or like Frank
everything
stuff, or
he knew it all, man. He's way deep. I've seen him at conventions too. I used to see him at San Diego Comic-Con. I started working, so I was hanging out in the punk rock scene, hardcore scene, which to be honest with you, I kind of got bored with after a while because it was just stupid and monotonous.
Nihilistic petulance only has so much.
Yeah, exactly. And then it just got to be like incredibly violent.
Yeah,
and it was just no fun. But it was all like performative violence in a way. I had more fun. Like the kids I hung out with in my town were like way more wild and rebellious, and then the hardcore kids were always acting like they were on camera somewhere. You know, they're always, like I said, very performative. It just got to be very boring. But anyway, went to work at a place called New England Comics, late '83. They're the people who eventually published The Tick. I don't know if you're familiar with The Tick.
I grew up with that shit on Fox TV.
Yeah. Ben Edlund. I never met the guy, but I was their first full-time employee, which was interesting.
Just so Raphael knows, The Tick is kind of like Ziggy meets Batman, kind of, or something like that. I don't really know how to put it. It's kind of postmodern humor, but also, it's been so long since I've even thought about it. Like that was like Eek the Cat era. I was like 5 maybe when I saw this shit on TV. So
you're a baby.
Yeah, I turned 40 in June. So yeah. I'm like a baby, Jesus Christ, like Benjamin Button, baby. I'm old. But what you're obviously into the comic scene. What are some of your favorite comics? Like, what are you drawn towards? Because I just showed my girlfriend the new Batman. I'd never seen the one with Robert Pattinson. It's like, that was actually pretty good, because I'm a Dark Knight fan and I like comic books, whether it's Grant Morrison or whatever. Comics are cool. I don't own any, but I get it. It's like a high art.
Well, so what happened is that I came down to Jersey and I went to art school.
Nice.
And at the Joe Kubert School. It's called the Kubert School now. But anyway, it's basically a trade school for comic book artists.
Nice.
And did a year there, and then shortly after that started getting work, freelancing and working in New York. I got a full-time job when I was 20, working in New York, drawing cartoons for t-shirts and stuff. So that was interesting. But as far as the comics, at a certain point, I think when I left high school, I kind of like lost interest in the superheroes, even though I ended up working for Marvel, freelancing for Marvel for 25 years. So my entire life, every single day, night and day, was, drawing superheroes. It's not as fun as it sounds, believe me.
It depends on like the lens through which you're looking at. I mean, if you're going every day, I can't project onto you and assume, because I'm guessing, even being in a rock band at some point, you're like, God damn it, I'm tired of hotels, or whatever. So it's like, I'm guessing you understand, just based off of what I've read, like the Joseph Campbell kind of hero's myth. And that these are the modern, obviously film and television have taken over in a large way, but these are windows, apertures of consciousness, kind of like tarot cards. Whenever I give a tarot reading to somebody who's like, oh, I don't believe in this shit, I'm like, it's a comic book we chopped up and we're projecting our consciousness onto, and then playing with the symbol sets and getting what you need. It's not like it tells the future. So
I'll tell you, Jim, I used to work with the tarot, and I stopped because I just felt like I was communicating with something that I couldn't see, and it was reading my mind.
And that irked you?
It got to be kind of unsettling in a way, because I would think something and then I'd draw the cards, whatever, and it was just mirroring back my thoughts in like real time. And I just found that very unsettling, to be honest with you. I felt like it felt invasive. It felt like something was intruding on my personal headspace that I wasn't aware of. It could all just be psychological, but like how then am I drawing these cards in these combinations that are so specific and so repetitive? Like, how is that happening? Like, what is the mechanism there?
That's the great question. That's the fucking question of all the ages. What's going on?
Yeah, but it was unsettling because it just felt so intimate. I just felt like violated by it.
Okay, so it's not paranoid, but something to the effect of where you're like, I kind of get what you're saying. I astral projected once by accident, and it was cool as fuck, and I didn't expect to do it because I didn't even know it was a thing. And then I did it, and I was like, whoa, I'm not doing that again. So I kind of understand, or like not intentionally at least, where it's like sometimes we tread on holy ground, if you want to put it that way, and we're like, I don't know how I feel about this, or I saw the alien, what do I do about this? So existentially, in some weird, I don't know about your presuppositions like ontologically, so it's like when you're like, oh, it fucked with me psychologically, it's like, I don't know if you're a mentalist where you're like all is mind, or we're in Brahma's mind, or if you're coming from the I forget his name now, but there's a Christian guy who is like, we're all machinations in the mind of God, kind of similar, thinking of a Hindu but Christianized. What did you feel like you'd lost agency? Because in some sense, like synchronicity is one hell of a drug, as they say. It's like, right, like it's cool, but like it irked you into terms of like you felt like you didn't have agency, or you just didn't understand the mechanism behind the phenomena.
Well, I felt, like I said, it felt like a violation, and I wasn't, I had no concept of what was on the other end of the phone. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like I'm having this discussion with something that's reading my mind that I can't see. That's not a position that is comfortable for me, at least. Some people might think it's cool, but if you've had enough experiences with the paranormal and stuff, you start to realize that it's not a game. And I've written extensively about this. People think it's a toy. People think it's a game. And I've been telling people for years, it's not. It's real and it's serious.
Yeah,
and if you're gonna
tools.
and if you're gonna mess around with it, you better make sure you know what you're doing, and you better make sure that you're completely committed to it. It's not. There's a consumeristic type of almost like infantile mentality that sort of permeates our entire culture in some ways, and comic books in many ways that are blamed for that, and superheroes. But people, when they start to bring this into other spheres, the tarot's been around for what, like 400 or 500 years or so, right?
Like Rider Waite came out with the Golden Dawn in the 1800s, but who knows how old it could be, potentially Egypt.
Well, we do know of decks that go back to the Renaissance, Italian decks, and things like that. I mean, what is the mechanics behind it? I don't know. I don't understand it. And
I don't know if anybody knows.
You asked me like ontologically how I would describe this stuff. Well, at this point in my life, in this point in my journey, let's say, I don't try to describe it. I don't try to explain the paranormal or synchronicity or anything like that, because you always end up with bad explanations because you don't have the data that you need. You don't have the breadth of experience that you need to make any kind of conclusion that has any authority, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
they say like the Tao that can be spoken is not the Tao, kind of thing. It kind of parallels. I mean, this is totally abstract and random, but it's like, let's just say Moses, for the sake of the argument of this point, is like, he saw a burning bush. How do you translate your fucking epic experience to a culture through language that when they're not actually grokking it for themselves? So there's a lot of ins and outs. I don't know, Raphael, I'm afraid of tarot is a strong word, but like, how do you look at tarot? Like, I've never looked at it as like an intelligence. I'm looking at it as honestly like just my consciousness playing with itself, basically.
Well, my first question to you, Chris, would have been, now that you are not using it anymore, do you feel less invaded, let's say? Because presumably whatever that thing is, does it mean that it goes away only because you stop using the tools? And someone's been commenting, don't play around with an Ouija board. So that's the one. Well, me neither. But that's the one particular methodology where I've heard and seen many examples where really very, very strange things happen. With tarot, now I'm not using it so extensively. I actually just told Jim today I was drawing cards the first time maybe in a year or two, but there were a few years when I was using it a lot. And to me, it's just, crystallized consciousness in a sense. I never necessarily felt, like you said, invaded in any type of way, not to say violated, right? But I always just felt it's like a mirror and it's just crystallizing. So it helps me to see what I'm thinking anyhow, but I can think about it more consciously or contemplate it because I put the cards there. But I've also had instances, like you said, where it seems, especially when you really get into it, then it may be quite repetitive, or it may appear as if it's giving you the same answer to the same thing.
But did you ever connect it to like a phone call conversation? I've never thought of it that way. Like, oh, I'm going to talk to ET now through the card, whatever.
No, not necessarily. The one experience I had once in a heightened or altered state of consciousness is I was dancing, and I was contemplating all these archetypes, and I tried to see all the connections between the archetypes. And of course, we have the elemental connections, we have the astrological connections,
numerological,
and many others. And as I was trying to connect all of those, I may have told you the experience once before, Jim, I went further and further and was like, oh, but this connects to this and this to this and this to this. And then I said like, all right, I'm in this heightened state of consciousness. What is the ultimate conclusion here? And then it just kept making all these connections. And in the end, the message I got was like 999 or 000, something like this, end of file, which is like a computer term. But to me, this was basically consciousness communicating back to me. There is infinite connectivity here. There is no real ultimate answer to be found within the system, because of course the archetypes are also constructed in a way in tarot that you can see the same archetype and you can have infinite perspectives on it and connect it back in infinite ways.
Well, I find that all very valid, but that just wasn't my experience.
I should say you have Chiron, your wound is in Pisces, 3rd house, conjunct Saturn. So it's like you might feel, I mean, this is gonna, I don't have to geek out on astrology too much, but it's like you might feel like there's like a spiritual wound in a sense where it's like I don't trust not God so much, but it's like what we're talking about even. It's like I don't want to deal with extending myself to an authority that I can't see or relate to as a self through my mental ideations. Like figments of your imagination could like fracture and turn into like, you know, demon thoughts that possess you kind of thing, where it's just like, holy shit, I can't stop thinking about the number 23 Jim Carrey movie type stuff. And looking at some of your work, I'm like, oh my God, you probably have bitten by a bug or two in your thinking. Anyway, we can keep going forward in your story. Anytime you want to detour, obviously we don't mind rabbit holes. So
I've totally forgotten what we were
illustration,
talking about
New York and stuff like that, Marvel.
Oh, right. Yeah. So I ended up working. Well, I worked in New York, interestingly enough, in the Empire State Building for 8 years.
It's a beautiful building.
No, it's not.
Oh, God damn it. Ruining my childlike
dreams. It's well, the places where the tourists go are very nice,
right,
but the actual offices are disgusting, and it was filthy. Like the ventilation systems are so disgusting. Like I don't know if they've ever been cleaned. And I was constantly getting sinus infections when I was working there, which was kind of unpleasant. But then I started working for Marvel. And
what was your in there? How did you stumble into that gig?
Well,
because that's a pretty heavy gig.
How did I stumble into that? I was friendly with one of the cashiers at this big comic book store in New York called Jim Hanley's Universe.
Word.
And I was doing some work, you know, just on spec comic book work for like a friend of his. And he said, you know, I have this friend who works, you know, for Marvel. This is when they were Toy Biz. And, you know, they're always needing people to do this work. And I was a real early adopter with like the Macs and Adobe Illustrator and Adobe Photoshop and everything. And at the time, everything they were doing was done by hand. So I sort of came in, you know, with my experience working on the Mac, and they're like, when can you start? You know?
Wonder Kid, come in and revolutionize us.
Yeah. So that was a lot of fun for a while. And then Disney bought them in 2009. And then all of a sudden it wasn't any fun anymore. It was, it got really hard and stressful. And I think it had a really negative effect on my health, to be honest with you. Just because of just being under that constant pressure and stress was really hard.
Mickey Mouse as a slave driver of a different horse of a different color.
Yeah. Well, the stuff I was doing was for the movies, not the comic books.
Okay.
And
like storyboarding or?
No, I was doing, how do I explain it? I was doing these like renderings, these illustrations for, you know, for lunch boxes and t-shirts and.
So the merch.
Yeah, well, that's where the real gravy is.
Yeah,
comics don't make any money; they never have.
It's the kids' meals.
Yeah, the real money is in the licensing and the merchandising. So that's what I was doing. And as soon as they got bought out by Disney, it's just like all the air just got sucked out of the room. But what I was doing is that I was doing like renderings of all the characters and everything. and everything I did had to be like approved. I had to go through this gauntlet, you know, it had to be approved by like my boss and then his boss and then his boss. And then it had to go out to the studio and it had to be approved by the actor and the actor's agent and the actor's manager. And then, you know, the film studio. I mean, it was just like this huge process.
A labyrinthian dominance hierarchy.
And just as a side question for someone who's completely ignorant. So 2 questions, just for some reason, I'm thinking of Blizzard Entertainment. First question, did they pay well? And second question, how do you do that when drawing something that maybe is a superhero you didn't come up with yourself, just with this verification process? Because I'm always wondering how to make sure that it looks exactly canon to what it's supposed to look like. Just curious, because I have no clue about.
Well, they gave me a lot of reference. You know, I was always supplied with a lot of reference, but I just got real good at it. I remember like when I was working on the Thor movie, drove me crazy because Chris Hemsworth, or either the actor or his agent or his manager, were like just incredibly insanely picky, and we're constantly sending the artwork back to be fixed. And it's like, I charge by the piece, so every time I had to do corrections, I wasn't getting paid for them. You know what I mean? The only way I would get paid for corrections is that if they'd already approved it and send it back for revision, then I could charge them. So that really drove me crazy. And another one is Scarlett Johansson, who, you know, you look at her and you think, oh, she's pretty and glamorous. But it's like when you start to look at her individual features, she's kind of weird looking. And
Scythian, dare I say.
Yeah, it's like, and then simplifying her to have it look like a you know, comic book style illustration is a lot harder than it sounds. It just, she drove me crazy. But the point is, I got really good at it, and after a while, I wasn't getting stuff sent back to fix and stuff. But it was a lot of work, and they kept making the costumes more and more elaborate, putting more and more buckles and, you know, all the piping that they would put in the, you know, the outfits and everything, and the boots and the, you know, the straps and the weapons, and I mean, all that stuff I had to illustrate, and it just got to be insane. I remember I had to do this illustration of the Falcon in the Captain America movie. Was it Civil War? I'm not exactly, I don't remember which one it was, because I actually stopped watching those movies after the first Avengers movie. I just like, all right, I'm so sick of this. I don't want to see this anymore. But the point is, I had to do this thing, and he had these like incredibly elaborate wings, and it took me a week to do like one.
Like the feathering.
Well, it wasn't the feathering. It was like all this like mesh and all this sort of apparatus, these mechanics and so on. I mean, I can show you the illustration if you're curious, but it drove me crazy. It just drove me nuts. And then he had this like camouflage uniform. So anyway, the point is, like, as soon as Disney takes over, they start just going nuts with all the detail, and it just became very stressful. But I stopped.
Did you not watch the whole like Infinity War and all that shit?
No,
bro.
Dude,
during COVID, during the lockdown, I binged all that shit, and I was like, I don't love all of it, but it synthesized well enough. You're gonna have a very different take. I mean, this is like someone who's grew up in the punk rock scene, and now you're watching like Joan Jett on Disney Channel or something. It's like, it's not gonna equate the same.
It's not gonna fly.
Yeah, it's not gonna pass mustard. But for me, I was like, okay, for what it is, it's fine. They really fell off after Stan Lee died. Like, everything coming out now is garbage, straight up and down. I haven't looked in a while, but I'm surprised you didn't see Infinity War. I think that was like the high watermark. I mean, there was like a symphony of 20 fucking themes leading up to that.
Well, you know, here's the thing. I wrote this book back in 2007, or it was published back in 2007, called Our Gods Wear Spandex. And that book did really, really well. And I got on TV and did all these documentaries.
I didn't know any of this. I'm glad, by the way. I like, oh shit, we got a rock star? I didn't even realize this.
So I'd done all this media for that, bunch of podcasts and a bunch of radio shows, you know, big radio shows on NPR and stuff. I just got sick of it. You know, I mean, I really lost interest in the superheroes. I mean, I was still reading comics, but it wasn't, you know, mainly superhero stuff. I just got really burnt out on it because I started reading comics when I was 3. I taught myself how to read when I was 3 by reading comics. And after a while, you just realize, how many times can Batman fight the Joker? You know, how many times can Spider-Man fight Green
The gum
Goblin?
lost its flavor. I got you.
You know, yeah, it just you get it. You know, it's part of your past. It's part of your childhood. You understand it. You don't need it anymore. It's just like, okay, I'm done with that. You know, and unfortunately, I mean, in many ways, I think that the immersion into superhero culture and geek culture in general, just I think it had a very negative effect on the culture and on society, to be honest with you. Maybe that will be my next book. That will be my follow-up book to it.
Infantilism in America.
Yeah, well,
That's
you know, this whole
interesting
infantile
cultural
mentality.
critique of these themes. Please go on.
Well, you know, seeing all these people on YouTube who, like, you know, 50-year-old men talking about Snow White, or you know,
Not like at a Jordan Peterson level. It's like she's got nice boobs or something like that.
well, it's just people who just have childlike tastes. You know, they're interested in childlike entertainment, and I'm not. You know, that stuff doesn't interest me. And so with the Marvel movies, they used to invite us to these big screenings at the Ziegfeld Theater in New York. And that was, you know, that was kind of exciting. So I'd see them all because I'd go to these screenings that they would have for all the freelancers and so on. But after a while, I'm just like, this is the same movie over and over again. And, you know, you talked about Infinity War. I tried watching Infinity War on TV. And I don't know if you've ever seen this, but all that CGI stuff looks like a bad video game on TV. It looks great on screen, but it just doesn't adapt. It doesn't scale down well.
Right.
It just looks really cheesy. So I think it was on Christmas, you know, my family, we had this family tradition. We'd always go to the movies, and then we just got sick of going to the movies because, you know, it got to be so expensive, and we just watched something on big screen TV at home or whatever. But I remember watching Infinity War and just thinking, like, I hate this so much that I couldn't make it more than 20 minutes into it. I just like, I hate this. This looks stupid. This looks terrible. The CGI looks awful on this TV. I know these stories by heart, having grown up reading them, and it just doesn't appeal to me.
You know what it kind of reminds me of? Kind of how you jump the scene in the punk rock world. Seems like to be an archetype for yourself. Like you're part of something very cutting edge and maybe revolutionary, whatever the fuck, however you want to look at it, like a scene that's really happening in a way, and then you kind of get jaded and pop out of it sooner or later.
Yeah, well, yeah, my kids call me a hipster. They accuse me of being a hipster. So
You're cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I was into that before anybody else. But I mean, there is an element of truth to that, because when things enter the mainstream, so often they're just like watered down or dumbed down, right? And the essence often gets lost. The original essence that drew me to so many of these things just eventually gets lost. I mean, with hardcore punk, it's just like I just got so sick of the violence. It just got so stupid.
It's like I don't want to cut
shows
myself.
and just seeing all these people just like with bloody faces and all the, you know, it's just like, what is this? Like, why are people doing this? This is retarded. And with comics, I mean, it's just like, it's childlike entertainment. How long, you know, can you suck on that teat for? You know, I mean, eventually you have to move on and find something a little bit more challenging, a little bit more mature. Okay.
Well, that might lend itself to weaving to the next kind of lily pad of conversation. Clearly, you're into synchromysticism. Is that drug wearing off? Like, when did you start getting into sync and seeing parallels within culture and mythology?
Forever.
Yeah, I mean, this has been the mainline drug forever, like the underlying addiction, and then you deal with other things. I mean, metaphorically speaking, like Mithras cults, and I mean, it's great seeing, because let's put it this way. It's a bell curve kind of thing where it's like, you know, the most woke people, this is a weird way to put it, the most woke people don't need to even talk about it. Like, they just get it. They're all like, I get it. I know the secret handshake, whatever. Cool. Most people are in the middle where they're like, show them a fucking few magic tricks and they're like, wow, more of the picture than meets the eye. And then some people are like, you know, just give me bread and circus, like NASCAR and, you know, American Idol, and I'm happy, or whatever it is. So when did you start turning on to magic with a K? I mean, that's a weird way to put it, but like just high synchronistic occultism. Because that's
I never saw it that way.
How do you see it?
Well, I prefer, like, I the accent is on the mystic, right? Synchromystic, right? That's the kind of like the enunciation. It's like synchromysticism. That's kind of, I always preferred like a mystical mindset to a magical mindset. Like I think that like the most powerful form of mystical experience is music. You know, I mean, some of the most profound experiences, like profound mystical experiences, I mean, even out of body experiences I've had involve or center on music. And that's always been a major part of my life, you know, growing up hearing music all the time. You know, my mother was a professional musician, right? So I saw that like music is not only the crown of the arts, but it's really the crown of all mystical experiences. You know, you were teasing me about the whole Cocteau Twins thing, but you know, I mean,
no, they're awesome. I hadn't really heard them, and I was like, this is actually solid shit. And I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass.
Well, when you talk about synchromysticism, I mean, starting in 2019, I had gone private with all the Cocteau Twins stuff because we started getting into areas that I didn't want to really publicize, sort of personal information. I mean, not personal for me, but personal for them. And getting into that, like really, really hardcore. So people would see what I was doing on the Secret Sun or see what I was doing on the Patreon or whatever, but they didn't realize that the real hardcore, like every day, several hours a day, synchromystic work I was doing for 6 years plus was being done there. So synchromysticism, it's almost something that I can't avoid. And I really do feel that my training as an artist kind of plays into that because I see things. I mean, part of my job when I was working for Marvel is that I'd get this reference, these pieces of art that I had to translate. Basically, I mean, it's, I'd have to take raster painted art and retranslate it into vector art, which is, I mean, that's some of you might be familiar.
I kind of pick up what you're putting down. I'm an art.
Yeah, I mean, it's just basically turning something from like a painted image to an image that you can silk screen or something.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, but I had to like see where mistakes were made, like if the ears weren't the same size or that the eyes weren't on the same level, or even like the costume details were incorrect. These are all things that I had to fix. These are things that I had to fix in post, as they say. So it really trained my eye to really pick things up almost immediately. Just seeing things, noticing things, I think is the best way to put it. I was trained through 100-hour weeks for years, basically, to really focus in on what is not only wrong, but like also pattern recognition. I really think that my training as an artist had a huge impact on my pattern recognition skills. Okay. Even, I used to play music. So, I mean, even that, that experience. So everything just was sort of building up to that. And I was doing what we now call synchromysticism, like back in the 80s,
Right.
and in the early 90s. And it's like, I'm not just saying that. I mean, I have these notebooks. This is pre-internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have all these notebooks filled with all this stuff. I mean, I was doing it like pretty hardcore starting in 93 is when I really was starting to do it in earnest. But that was like me experienced. Let me just back up a bit. I had read Man and His Symbols by Carl Jung.
Jung is a dope guy.
Yeah, and if you've seen that book, I mean, it's very heavily illustrated. And I really tuned into that because there was another book that I was just so fascinated by when I was a kid. It was called Man Watching. It's by an anthropologist named Desmond Morris. If you ever get a chance to pick that book up, just check it out because it's all about nonverbal communication. And that's something that really fascinated me. I really became fascinated by how people communicate, often without intending to, nonverbal body language and all the rest of it. So that all contributed to my interest and my work with synchronicity or synchromysticism, I guess you would say. And it was just something I almost like fell into, you know.
Yeah,
I mean, I didn't even know what the term synchronicity was until 1983, when I got an issue of Rock Bill at Quincy Records, and it was on the Police album Synchronicity.
Great album.
And there were all these sidebars, with examples from Jung's writings of people experiencing synchronicity. So that was 1983. So that was another real eye opener for me. But it wouldn't be again till like 10 years later that I really started doing the work in earnest. And it wouldn't be until 13 years after that I started blogging about it. So, but it was something that I always do. It's like I almost do it naturally. It's almost like reactive.
Well, I'm looking at your chart. You've got Jupiter, which is like expansion, luck, however you want to put that. Dumbledore, he's like gifting you all the time. Your gift is conjunct your sun and Cancer, 7th house, which is Libra flavored. So basically, you're kind of a midwife of vibrations within relationship, whether that's acoustic or nonverbal, like you're saying. And your Mars is up in 7th house in Gemini. So it's like you move towards differentiation. And that's one of the bigger parts of, I think, seeing synchronicity is like seeing the Vesica Pisces of how things correspond. I mean, that's the whole fucking point, right? It's like, how does this relate to that? As Raphael alluded to earlier in his ecstatic tarot trip or whatever, it's like it's all one big thing, kind of infinitely gushing or something like that. But the capacity to differentiate between yin and yang and how do they interplay and all that jazz, you're naturally wired for that. So you probably do feel very intuitively and almost in a mother, like I said, a midwife. I mean, it's the Cancer is the mother. So you're like, I'm helping you guys birth. I'll hold your hand when you go down that Willy Wonka tunnel ride. Like, it's a fucking wild trip out here, kids, but like we'll go through it together. What was the turning point in 93? You said that you were like, I really kind of saw something, or what was the when did you start kind of geeking out and really taking it seriously in terms of a journalistic almost approach?
Well, there are a number of factors that sort of came together, that sort of coalesced. It was early September of 1993 that things really sort of took off. One thing that I should mention, that people who follow me are very familiar with, is when I was a kid, I would hallucinate all the time. I had a lot of health issues that I would get really high fevers, like 105, like crazy fevers. Like, I don't know how my brains didn't boil or something, but because I had these really high fevers, I'd hallucinate a lot. And that sort of became part of my baggage, as you said.
Well, your initiation. I mean, that's your portal in kind of thing.
Yeah. And one thing that I've always talked about is when I had this like leprechaun encounter while I was hallucinating, which was rather intense and extremely memorable and extremely vivid. I would have very vivid, almost real types of hallucinations.
What was the gist of that leprechaun trip? I mean, I know it was sober or whatever, but like the experience.
Well, so I was very sick. I was sleeping on the couch because I couldn't go up and down the stairs. And one night, it was February, March of 1979. I was 12 years old. Just wake up and there's this leprechaun in the middle of the living room sitting on a rock screaming at me in some weird language. You know what I mean?
Enochian.
Yeah, it was kind of like moving like a puppet almost, like like weird stop motion animation, and it had these like glowing red eyes, and it was like bald, but it had hair on the side and a little beard, and it had it was wearing like sort of like grubby clothes, and it had a rope belt, right? But not only that, so it was sitting on this rock, but then as I looked again, like basically my entire living room disappeared and became like this like science fiction landscape, right? Like just looking on into this distance, and these rocks. And I don't know if you know Gordon White, but when I told him that story, he said the rocks are like boundaries, and like creatures like that are like boundary keepers. So it was like, sort of stumbling accidentally into another dimension, and he's
Like a
saying,
guardian
"Get
with a
out!
threshold.
Get the hell out! You don't belong here."
That's
And
fascinating.
so and then it went on for a short period of time, but then the ceiling opens up, and all these gold coins just start raining from the ceiling. So
Jackpot.
yeah,
Sounds
so
like a Jean-Claude Mobius kind of surreal situation. And you're 12 in 1979. Like the Talking Heads hadn't even dropped the fucking Remain in Light yet. So I mean, I don't know if you're in the Talking Heads.
oh yeah, all that, especially like Remain in Light, Fear of Music. Fear of Music, I think, came out like in April of '79. So.
Okay, so they were I
was into all that stuff.
Because that's kind of punk, but not really. I mean, it's like,
well, it was new wave. Yeah, but
that's
the stuff I would listen to. Like I didn't go home and listen to like hardcore
death metal. Yeah,
I'd go home and listen to Talking Heads and Susie and the Banshees and stuff like that. Like stuff that was like good.
Did you like Van Halen?
Van Halen, I loved Van Halen. Yeah,
I saw David Lee Roth came back out like after 5-year hiatus recently, and it's like, please, sir, like the leprechaun, stay away. Or whatever. It's bad, man. It's a.
I remember in the '80s, I thought David Lee Roth was like the coolest son of a bitch walking the planet, and he just burned that all away, burned all his human capital away. Yeah, well,
he's
you know what?
Miscreant or whatever. It's actually funny.
He's out of his mind is really what it is.
Yeah, no, like nuts. Hollywood showbiz burned him like a light bulb. He's just not quite. Like it's a vessel, almost like a Gollum of Hollywood. It's like whatever he was channeling at one point, he ain't channeling no more. And
well, the thing you notice here's the thing about musicians that people don't understand. So people hear all these horror stories about musicians, like they did this or they got addicted or they did this terrible thing or whatever happened. I mean, good musicians are all incredibly damaged people. I have an expression: the muses choose broken vessels, and I mean that's really what it is. Because when you work with music, you understand that you become a conduit and a channel for it. You don't create music or music that's any good. It's like I said, it's channeled through you. It flows through you.
Queen of Cups. I'm a conduit.
Yeah, exactly. So when people like David Lee Roth, I mean. I just remember like when I was a kid, like thinking Van Halen were like the greatest, even though I'm a punk rocker, I remember having like a conversation with like one of the big head punk rock guys who passed away recently. And we're both like, yeah, we like Van Halen, like I like Van Halen too. We couldn't say it out loud.
Van Halen closet.
Yeah.
It's funny because my dad, I mean, I'm 40 in June, right? So I'm not old, but I'm not young. My dad, he didn't raise us on the Beatles and shit. Like I remember turning distinctly on to Pink Floyd and Zeppelin in like middle school and being like, what the fuck? I didn't know about this. He was teaching us about Talking Heads and Jump, Van Halen, all that shit. One of the best things I've ever heard. I mean, it's still cool. That's how I would put it. At the beginning of, I think it's Hot for Teacher. Yeah. All the kids are coming to school and David Lee Roth says, I don't feel tardy or something like that. And it's just like, that's so cool. That's like punk to me. It's Bart Simpson as fuck.
That album. So that album came out in my senior year, and like when I hear that album, all I can think about is like incredible pool parties, keg parties, beach parties. I mean, that album was like the party album of 1984, and it makes me very wistful thinking about it because I just remember like all the crazy times that album and the Billy Idol Rebel Yell and Psychedelic Furs and. Oh,
it ain't what it used to be. Cancers can be nostalgic, and like I give you full permission to be nostalgic. You got Jupiter. As far as that fever thing, I mean, your Pisces Chiron, I mean, in third house, I got to say this like in a cogent way and not like a judgmental way, but it's like mental health and like hallucinations and stuff like that. Not surprising that's on the table for you. But like I said, it's almost like Chiron is the wound where the light enters, so it's like a double-edged sword. It's like, Tiny Tim fucking can't run like the other kids, but my God, he's going to melt all our hearts with the message or whatever. So it's not bad or good. It's just like kind of a Achilles heel that you're going to, it's like any fucking superhero. It's like, Batman. Oh man, he's a depressed orphan. Meh. It's like, okay, well, there's going to be some gold there that you can't get otherwise.
Well, one thing I will tell you that's really interesting is that when I started experimenting, with hallucinogens and so on, I know this place. I know where this is. I understand this landscape. I know this territory. It was very familiar to me. I actually had mentioned this to Graham Hancock one time, and he had said that like when you have high fevers like that, it trips the DMT circuits in your brain. I don't know if that's the pineal gland or whatever, but it just like that world, like that, the world of like mushrooms and acid and everything,
the fever dream space.
Like I knew that space, I understood it. I'd been there, for a good chunk of my childhood. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it was a place that I enjoyed being. My hallucinogenic experiences, it's kind of like Alan Watts talked about, like, you pick up the phone and then, when you're done with the call, you hang up the phone again. I don't know if I was that abrupt about it, but
I still fucking trip all the time. I love being a psychonaut. It's one of those things, though. I mean, I don't smoke cannabis now. I used to grow and be way into it, but it's like just like your punk rock scenes and stuff, like, or Marvel or whatever. It's like the edge loses it, and then you can kind of get caught up in the culture or the momentum of the thing, as opposed to like the epiphany, the apotheosis, or what I mean? Like, you can't go to Studio 54 every fucking night and expect the burning bush. Like, it just isn't going to work that way. That's kind of what can happen with psychedelics. And psychedelics are tricky because I think necessarily they undermine the ego in such a way that it's always novel. Like, the novelty level is super high. Whereas if I get drunk or do coke or something like that, which I don't do anymore, you kind of know what you're setting up for. It's not like, oh my god, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going to happen. It's kind of like Jon Stewart in Half Baked, I think, or something. He was like, have you done that on weed? Like, early on in your pot career, it's like everything is amazing. Get on a roller coaster high. I've never done that. Listen to this album high. I've never done that. But if you become a pothead, it's like, then it becomes, and I have nothing against stoners. Like I said, I used to grow. I'd rather people be stoned than drunk.
I was a major stoner in high school. I mean, it was like morning, noon, and night.
Yeah. Pot zombie is what I call it. It's like,
I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't smoke anymore, but I do, just full disclosure, I do take edibles every night to help me sleep. Because if I it's the only thing that I've been able to use that will help me sleep through the night.
You tried melatonin?
Yeah, it's melatonin. Like, I was trying melatonin again. I was thinking, oh, maybe I shouldn't, be taking so many of these edibles. I'll try the melatonin again. And I swear to God, every single night I'd wake up at 4 a.m. and couldn't get back to sleep until 7 all the time. Like, I just was not, I have a sleep disorder, so I wasn't sleeping through the night. But this is going to sound so weak, but I've had a lot of experiences with edibles that have been pretty intense. Edibles that it's a different way of metabolizing. You metabolize the THC differently when you consume it than when you smoke it, and it does have more of a hallucinogenic character to it. I don't know if you're familiar with some of the literature on that, but I've had plenty of experiences when I sit there and I slice things. Like, am I getting the right amount? Because if I take too much, things just go a little trippy on me.
It's funny that you say that, because I mean, like I said, I do a lot of psychedelics and smoke a lot of weed, so I'm not too afraid of it now. But back in high school, in my senior year, I had a nervous stress and drug-induced nervous breakdown, and the edible was what the catalyst was. Like, I was disassociated so hard. I thought I was like connected to the Iraq War psychically and all sorts of crazy shit.
I've had some. I had some bad experiences. When I first took edibles, I didn't like understand the dosage, and I ate like 3 of them.
Yikes!
And it was like going to hell. It was like being tormented by the Dementors in the Harry Potter novels. It was really bad. It was really unpleasant. It was worse than like my worst acid trip, to be honest with you. So my worst bad acid trip is what I'm saying.
Feels more heavy and like inebriated. Like, acid's clear, so it's like, if it's bad, I can just be like, all right, I'll shift my focus, or get in a different vibration. Where the
physiological
like,
aspect of it, right? This. Yeah, the somatic aspect of it is much more intense than that. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
All right, so I'm curious. I mean, tell us a little about, especially with the Queen of Cups, and I know you've got dogs at some point that need tending, so we'll keep an eye on that. But
They're quiet. They're
yeah,
good.
hush you. But try to walk us through some, because I was looking through your blog and I'm trying to pick up what you've covered so much for so long that you're probably like the punk rock scene, kind of jaded to it. But it's like, for people that don't know about the Mithrian cults, or for people that don't know about, like me, Cocteau twins and that stuff, how do you even try to engage in an apologetic to a normie, so to speak, or do you let the fucking kids follow the crumbs to your Hansel and Gretel witch oven and get baked in your oven? Do you see what I mean? How are you parlaying this information to the public? Obviously it's not for everybody, because when I read this kind of stuff, especially with synchronicity, and you've said it and I've looked at your chart, so I'm like, you're balls deep in the mystic for sure. Like the river of magic and mysticism and stuff, it's not that different. Creativity and insanity are not that far apart, right? So it's like, and I'm not saying you're insane by any stretch, but I think when we wade in these waters, it can get kind of confusing, and it's also ineffable. Like it's like having an epiphany on acid, and then someone's like, what are you looking at? It's like, I cannot describe to you how I'm being moved at the soul level by that refraction of that penny in the sunlight or whatever it is. So how do you take these deep, very kind of highly webbed holographic kind of philosophies and present them to people? I mean, other than a blog, obviously you write about it well, and I should say it's very accessible. So if anybody hasn't checked out his blog, I'm guessing most of the people in the comments have. Secret Sun blog is well worth scoping if you want to go down some fucking rabbit holes. But yeah, when did you start like compiling this stuff and feeling confident enough to do so and expressing your own experience? Because pearls to swine kind of thing. It's like not everything's for everybody. And how do you deal with that kind of the feedback loop of engage? It's cool to engage with the geeks who geek out, but then it's like not everybody's going to hear the album the same way as you, so then you kind of lose. You see what I'm saying? I'm rambling. Anyway, you can talk about this at any length or in any aspect you want, but just some of the topics you touch on in sync, and how you feel your role as a midwife for these things are.
Is there a specific question?
No, I mean, I like I said, I'm a Gemini sun and moon, so I tend to ramble. People are like, shut up and let them talk. It's like, I have a Chiron conjunct my moon. It's horrible. I ramble. I guess my question is, when you started like inculcating the magic and like really kind of diving in 93, we'll just say, how did you tell that to friends and family? Was this like your secret journal, your secret garden, and like some friends found out about it and the internet makes it kind of more accessible? Or like how have you walked this path?
Well, you had asked me about the 1993 experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I had this dream. So, like, as I said, I had this very confused schizophrenic upbringing that was like half Puritan, half libertine. It was very bifurcated, right? But my experiences in church were great. I unlike a lot of people, like my religious upbringing was really positive, because it was like an extended family. And I had this dream in 1993 that I'd went to this church with my friend and my wife, and we were sitting in the sanctuary, and the sanctuary was sort of like a semicircle, almost like an old Roman auditorium, how this sort of
amphitheater. Yeah.
Amphitheater,
like
exactly.
Pompeii or whatever.
Exactly. So I had this dream, and the minister was this black dude, and he had this like grail, like a golden grail, and it was just sort of emanating this like pure light. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And that dream like really stuck with me, because it was at a church. I mean, it was a church I'd never been to, but it was a church that I used to walk by all the time because I worked, right across the street from it for a long time. And so on September 5th, 1993, I was like, well, I'm going to go check that church out and see what's happening. So I went into the church, and it was Communion Sunday. Methodists only have communion once a month, but it was also a semicircular design in the sanctuary. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then the pastor comes out, and he's this black guy, And I'm like, oh, well, that's interesting too, right?
Check.
Yeah, I had no idea about that, right? And then I find out, then I realized that he is the brother of the pastor at my old church who would, I mean, his brother had taken the reins of the church long after I'd stopped going, but it turns out that he was the brother because of the pastor, because my grandmother and my aunt and some other family members still went to that church. And I was like, what are the odds of that? You know what I mean? So I have this dream that's sort of like bringing me into this experience. And there we go. It's obviously a prophetic dream. And then there's this whole synchronicity where he's the brother of the pastor of this church that I grew up in. And a lot of other things happened around the same time that probably too much to go into. One of which is that Friday, the X-Files premiered.
Ooh.
Yeah, which, is obviously a huge part of my experience. But that came on. See, that whole experience it was almost like the culmination or the climax of this whole experience where I was doing a lot of dream work. I was having a lot of synchronicity. Like I said, I was writing all this down like longhand and in notebooks and so on and so forth. And it just felt like that was like a turning point. And that really got me started on the whole concept of synchronicity and, started reading Jung, a lot of Jung, got interested in the Gnostics for a while. But, just like this immersion into this whole mystic world. And at the same time, I discovered Gnosis magazine. I don't know if anybody remembers Gnosis magazine out there, but that was published by this old underground cartoonist named Jay Kinney. And there were so many great magazines back in the 90s before the internet, I really miss them. That was like kind of my culture with these great magazines. New York Press was one of them, Gnosis magazine, Details, Mondo 2000. It just felt like you were part of something. It wasn't just like all these random websites or whatever.
It was the height of organic culture, postmodern organic culture.
It was real.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a big difference between just bits and bytes on a screen and a real physical, tangible object that you can hold in your hands. I mean, the experience is a different experience, and you process the information differently, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Tactility is a crazy thing.
Yeah. But this was also, a point in time where people my age, we were sort of coming into our own, basically. I started working, like I said, started freelancing for Marvel, but I was also doing like work in advertising, and I was working for this one advertising agency where like everybody was in their early or mid 20s, like I was, and you just felt like you were part of something, and that's all gone now. It really is. When I was 20, I just basically saw an ad in the paper, in the Village Voice, and walked up and got a job. $20,000, which is an amazing amount of money at the time, right?
Yeah.
But I also had like full health insurance.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, we didn't pay for it. My first son was born that year. We didn't pay a dime, because whatever my insurance didn't cover, my wife's insurance would cover. I mean, people just have no concept. I mean, this is why I'm really sympathetic towards Zoomers today. Young kids.
Mm-hmm.
They get a lot of abuse. They get trashed a lot, and a lot of it is justified, to be honest with you. But they just getting such a raw deal in life, and that's something that we really need to address. Where a young person can't get a decent job, just with no experience, can't find like just a cheap apartment to rent. I mean, we've really shut a lot of, well, not we, but the society has shut a lot of doors for these kids, and that's something that really needs to be changed. But that's a side road. But anyway, so I had this whole mystical kind of experience where, like, basically my dream was clearly prophetic, right? Because the sanctuary even looked like the sanctuary. And again, I'd never been inside that building. I'd never even walked inside the door. And what are the odds of that? And the minister being the brother of the minister from this church, and I didn't even know his name. I was talking to my aunt about it. So it was really profound. And to be honest with you, it's like I kind of miss that. And I always wonder if like just doing all this work sort of organically and manually, like writing things down and getting books out of the library, getting books from Barnes and Noble or whatever. I mean, I almost start to feel like there is a certain power in the physical and the tangible that we've kind of lost. I mean, we've gotten other things in return, but
It's always a trade-off. I hear you.
yeah,
It's
but
not
the physical
Faustian.
and the tangible, it's something that, I've been telling people on my Patreon, like, I really want to do a conference next year, because there's just no substitute for getting together in the same room and congregating. I mean, this is great. I love this. I love doing this, talking to you guys, doing all these kind of things. I do a lot of this stuff with my group, but it's
a simulation. It
is a simulation, and you're always removed.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to sound so strange, but the whole sensory environment has a lot to do with it. And it has a lot to do with it. And this is going to sound weird, but it's smell, like scent, like odor. You know what I mean? It's like when you go into a physical space, particularly a physical space where people are cognizant of creating a sensory experience for you. Smell is very powerful.
The olfactory is a big deal. I know that, what we're kind of getting is, like we said earlier, is tactility. We've got convenience, we've got speed, we've got the fucking Library of Alexandria at our fingertips, but at the same time, we've lost a major part of what it means to even be a human. And for hundreds of thousands of years, we were gathering in caves that smelled a certain way, or smelled the pheromones of our friends and enemies, or whatever it is. And now it's so removed that there is this kind of, I think Marshall McLuhan talked about it well, but it's like we've entered this age of anxiety, essentially, where we've externalized our nervous system, and we're not really sure exactly how to deal with that. It's cool to have these conversations. They're presaged very well in things like 2001: A Space Odyssey or whatever. Like, this is where we are now is not so far from where we could have predicted we would be, if that makes sense. It's like it's a logical extension of the movement forward in human evolution. But at the same time, we're alienating ourselves from things that are fundamental to our sensory experience in such a way that it's like a copy of a copy of a copy. At some point, like you were saying with Zoomers and stuff, like they're getting an experience of reality that's not, and I'm not a hyper nostalgist or anything, but it's like something about the 90s and 2000s is gone. Even in the Matrix movies, like we stopped, the simulation is emulating that period because it's the height of your culture.
And dude, the 80s. Let me put in a plug for the 80s. Right?
Okay, I was born in 85, so it's like I can't speak to it too well, right?
Oh, you missed out, man. You missed all the fun.
Is there do you have, obviously you're an illustrator and do a lot of stuff with Patreon and blogging and stuff, but would you ever consider doing a zine, or kind of rehashing elements of the past into an
well, I publish books. I've got books out.
Okay, I kind of do that. It's like I said, I feel like a fucking Bart Simpson who stumbled into like a Freemason lodge. I'm like, oh, I did not realize you guys have a history here. So I haven't read any of your books. I just saw your blog over the course of a few years, like very peripherally, and now I'm like, oh, I'm really interested in your books, because some of your books are talking about essentially America and occultism and stuff, like deep, heavy shit. That we could talk about your books, but in like writing pulp is one thing, but I'm saying like the zine, kind of the punk aspect. Is there an element that this is just an idea? It's not something you have to.
I did do a zine back in the 90s.
Right. What about these days? If you're missing the charm, can you rub the lamp and get the muse back out, or how does that work?
You know what?
No pressure.
There isn't really the culture for it. Back in the 90s, zine culture was really happening. And it's almost like if you wanted to be taken seriously as an aspiring writer, you had to publish a zine, or if you wanted to do comics, you had to do like a mini comic, like Xerox comic. It was just a different culture. It had different expectations, because the physical object, CD, DVD, VHS, books, whatever, were still highly valued. People still attach value to physical media. Okay. And today, I guess I could. I don't know. I mean, it's just
I hear you. It would fall on
I
deaf
don't know
ears
what.
somewhat.
First of all, I'm so busy with so many different projects that like I don't know what I would like. All right, I got to cut out like another chunk of time to do this zine or so on. You know, it's just I don't know. It's just I feel like the blogging was zines are really disposable, right?
Mhm.
And they're designed to be disposable. The expectation is that you'd pick up a zine for $1 or $2, you know, at some record store or comic book store or whatever, and you'd read it and just toss it out. I mean, it wasn't something that had the expectation to be saved, right? So for me, blogging was sort of like a natural extension of that. You know, it just seemed like the logical next step because I was actually blogging. I mean, not a lot of people realize this because the platform is long gone, but I was blogging on Xanga for like 2 years before I started blogging on the Secret Sun. Maybe more, like I think it was maybe like 3 years almost. So I was blogging on this platform that no longer exists, but I found it like I don't think I could do the writing that I do today if I hadn't had that experience. You know, if I hadn't had the experience of, I mean, nobody was reading it, obviously. You know, it was Xanga, and it was a million years ago. But one thing, if there are any people who want to become writers or creators of any kind, no matter your age or the medium or your interests, just do it. Okay. Like people go, should I get a publisher? Should I go to school? It's like, don't do any of those things. Those things don't matter anymore. Just create. It doesn't, if people don't read it, whatever. I mean, like I said, I blogged for 3 years and I don't know if I got any readers whatsoever. I mean, I didn't have the access to the statistics or anything like that, but it didn't matter because I was doing it because I wanted to write. I wanted to sort of express myself, and I wanted the experience. And I was also doing a lot of Amazon reviews. I'm not allowed to Amazon review anymore because I'm an Amazon published author, so they don't let me.
Conflict of interest.
Yeah, they don't let me post reviews anymore. But I did a lot of reviews back then, and unfortunately, they all got flushed. As soon as I created like my own author page in 2007. All my reviews got flushed. I was really, really upset about it. But
it's very Queen of Cups, what you're talking about, which is like let it flow. In a sense, I mean, I'm a musician, so it's like how many times have I jammed? And it's like the angels and the muses and God and me are the only ones to know about this. Sometimes you just create for the sake of creation and not so much how capitalistic or how much reach does this get. And I think a lot of people in this day and age, like some of our best podcasts, nobody heard. And they're conversations that are some of my favorite conversations I've had as a monkey on earth or whatever, right? So
well, just hold on to them.
Right. Well,
maybe people will want to hear them in the future.
Akashic record or something. All right. Well, yeah, no pressure about the zine thing. And I obviously know you're an author now. I'm more aware of that. So I'll check out your stuff. What kind of projects are you doing? Where's your attention going currently?
Okay. Where's my attention going now? So I have the Patreon and I also have a Substack. And they, I bounce things back and forth on those two platforms. The Patreon is a little bit more like multimedia, as far as I do podcasts. I'm doing a true crime podcast as well because, that's what all the cool kids are doing, right? But I'm also working on a book. Back in 2008, I worked on I co-authored the official X-Files book, The Complete X-Files. And then they reprinted it in 2016, I think. And that was like a cool experience, but it was the restrictions were suffocating. It was like, I think it was like 40,000 words, which is ridiculous. And all these kind of things were going on. So I always wanted to do like my own X-Files book. So I'm finally doing that now. It's something that I've been working on for a long time. So I'm hoping to get that out in September, but it's not going to be like, just
what's your spin on it? Yeah. What's your take?
What I'm going to really get into is a lot of the really deep and heavy symbolism that most people aren't really aware of. because the thing that really fired my career, like I said, I was doing all this kind of stuff. I was blogging on Zanga and had done some comic books in the 90s and so on. But the thing that really got me, you're asking me what really got me started on the synchromysticism, is that I had done this whole synchromystic analysis of the X-Files, like really deep, crazy kind of heavy duty synchromysticism. And I sent it to one of the executive producers.
Oh shit.
And he posted it on his blog.
That's approval. If there ever was any, goddamn.
Right. I was like, there you go. And I was really
no cease and desist letter. It's like, all right, perfect. I've been in.
No, it felt very validating. It really did.
Yes.
Like I felt like I'd made it, all my crazy, weird, synchromystic nonsense ideas were impressive enough, at least as far as how I presented them, for one of the top guys on the show to post on his own blog. But here's the thing that really helped me doing like that work and some of the other work I was doing before I started in the Secret Sun, is that I really learned how to organize material. And this is kind of something I got from Jung, right? The thing that I always really appreciate about Jung is that he'd have all these kind of like psychological or mystical experiences, but he organized them and he classified them and he gave you a way to make sense of them in a way that maybe rationalists might not understand or might not approve of, but it's something that you can present to somebody else. And I'll tell you another thing that had a huge impact on me was, being on the internet from like that same time period. So I'd gotten on the internet around the same time that I had that prophetic dream and everything. And just like arguing with people on the internet, it really, when you end up arguing with these random people who aren't going to, it's like pushing against an unmovable wall. You're never going to move the wall, but you'll build up your muscles really, really efficiently.
Wax on, wax off on the internet.
Yeah, so like just arguing with people on the internet, like people who are never going to change their minds, who are never going to agree with you. But I wasn't arguing with them for their benefit. I was arguing for them because it was really helping me build my skills as far as, presenting persuasive arguments. It taught me how to organize material and how to present material. And most importantly, to always get corroboration and reference for the arguments that you're making. It really helped me develop skills that, like I said, I'd been doing synchromystic work since forever, but I was able to learn how to present this material in such a way. Because you were asking me, like, is there an in for people or the initiative? I mean, I try as often as possible to give people like a primer, give people sort of like an introduction, sort of walk people through it. After a while, it got to be like, I had like a certain recurring audience who were getting bored every time I was starting from the top,
Mm-hmm.
People like, okay, we know all this, get to the new information. So, but for a long time, because I realized that somebody, like every post that I was doing was going to be somebody's first post.
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. The first rabbit hole. I got you.
Like, it's somebody out there was completely oblivious to everything that I was talking about, and was only going to be able to have an in, let's just say, be able to enter that rabbit hole if I sort of guided them towards it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, like synchronicity didn't mean shit to me until I heard about Jack Parsons and NASA and the occult ritual and shit, and I was like, what? Like, and I'm not into this shit. And I was like, you know what I mean? It's like you take the red pill, you're down. You can't undo it. So, and I will just say, what you're saying earlier about like how like Jung kind of basically creates a taxonomy of the unconscious and symbols and makes it grokkable, because Freud was a cokehead and he was an asshole, and Jung is like a psychedelic kind of guy.
I will always defend Freud.
Okay,
people bust on Freud, but I think he did a lot of very
Well, he
important
had
work.
value. Yeah. I'm not saying he's valueless, but
People always reduce it to like infantile sexuality. It's just like, have you read his books? I mean,
he had something on
you
Moses
think that's
that
the
was pretty
sum and
hot.
the sum and totality of his work and his arguments? It's like, I think people get very knee jerk about Freud. And again, I think that if you're a Jungian, I mean, Jung was basically sat at Freud's feet for X number of years. I mean,
like
Freud was basically his mentor.
Like modernity had to lead into postmodernity, and I'd say the beginning of postmodernity is people like Jung and quantum mechanics and shit like that, the art Jackson Pollock, whatever it is. Like we started being like, whoa, it's different than we think. Whereas the height of modernity, with A plus B is C, high logic, representationalism at like a very obvious way, is more Freud. And it's nothing against him. He just finds himself in that zeitgeist in that way, being an aperture of that vibration, dare I say. Anyway, what I was saying earlier though is, and I'll make it brief because why not? How you present these things is important, and your learning of articulation and persuasion, as you were saying, through the kind of wetting on the stone of the internet, is something like, Joseph, if he had just told his brothers about his dream a little more articulately, he might not have been thrown into prison or the well and all this shit metaphorically.
Dungeon.
Yeah. So but even that was good and necessary in some long-term thing. X-Files is one of those weird things because I was growing up. I remember the only time, because it was like coming on late. I was probably like 8 years old. I wasn't even allowed to watch that shit. And I remember like one night I was like home alone and I sat in this big chair and the lights were off. And it was this episode where this family was inbreeding and they like mom lived under the house. And I was just sitting there
under the bed. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just like, I had to turn on the lights. Like, I mean, I didn't really fuck with it for a long time. What about the X-Files are you drawn to? I mean, obviously you're pretty into the X-Files, but for those of us who haven't seen all the episodes kind of thing, I've seen the movie. I think they're even coming out with a 2.0 soon, right?
Yeah,
mixed feelings.
I have no interest in that. I wasn't even interested in those. I mean, I was interested in them, but I kind of wish they never did those revival seasons they did a few years ago. You should always know when to quit when you're ahead. The great ones know when to leave the stage.
Seems like a theme in your life, man. You're like, this scene's dead. I'm out. And it's like, but it's not even midnight.
Well, when you kind of plugged into the essence, you don't accept substitutes.
I hear you. Why half-ass it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when I had, when I was very young and into my teenage years, having like really profound experiences, like really intense, profound experiences, that I wasn't interested in the simulacrums. I wasn't interested in the substitutes.
The memes.
Because, I had those experiences. And that to me is, experience is really the wellspring of all mysticism. I think mysticism almost by definition implies experience, particularly a very heavily immersive experience. And when
it's just myth, it's just like, this is what I heard. It's like,
I'll give you a great example. So this is going to sound kind of cringe. So in 1981, I went to see U2 at the Boston Orpheum. Okay. I was 15 years old. And it was an amazing experience. I mean, like very intense experience, because it was like they were brand new and they'd never played like a place this size before in America. And it was just like there was a freshness and a newness about it. And I was like on my chair and like I'm just my shirt is soaked with sweat and I took my shirt off and I'm like spinning around and like everybody's being baptized in my sweat. I mean, it was just like a really intense out-of-body experience. And then I saw him 2 years later, right, on the War Tour in 1983, and it was so boring and so cringe.
The thrill is gone. It's
the thrill, like it really was. It was like, what happened? I saw them in 81, and it was like, I guess in the intervening 2 years, Bono was just sitting around smelling his farts all day. I mean, he completely lost the plot. He completely became obsessed with his own
ego or whatever,
and his own mythology.
It happens.
But you really, I was so bored, I mean, I was like 2 years, not even 2 years, like a year and a half before. Cause I saw them in like November of 81. And then I saw them again in like March or April of 83. So it wasn't even a full 2 years. And it's like, just in that 18-month period or whatever, they completely lost the plot and completely became so totally cringe and so boring. So that's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. You know, if you're saying that I just will sort of pick things up and then drop them, you know, when they're no longer fun or whatever. You know, I had that really heavy immersive experience in 81, and then in 83 I was like, can we just go? Like, I was just sitting around like just making out with my girlfriend the whole time because I was so bored, and we both were bored, and I think a lot of people were bored. You know, you just saw that it just had become cringe, and that happened more times than I can count, and not even just with bands. You know, it happened with comic books and movies and everything like that. It's like I have the fortune and the misfortune to be growing up at a time when everything was really fresh and new and exciting. So like 1982, it's like Conan, Road Warrior, Blade Runner, Poltergeist, you know, I mean, all these incredible movies, right? One after the other. And, you know, comic books, like all the movies.
Probably Tron. I'm trying to think of.
Yeah, well, Tron, maybe not so much Tron. I wasn't a big fan of Tron, but
the remake's pretty good.
It was all right.
Remake looks okay.
All right. It was very primitive, but you know, so all the, you know, we were talking about the comic book movies and everything. It's like I was reading all those comic books that those stories are based on when they were coming out. You know, I mean,
like a fleshing out of
starting in the 70s, but you know, particularly in the early 80s. So in the early 80s, when like the alternative rock and the punk rock really comes into its own, and the comic book thing really comes into its own, and the movies are really exciting. You know, it's like, it was such an incredible time to be a kid who was really tuned into this stuff, because it's like every day I would come home from school, if I went to school, because I skipped school a lot, but I'd come home from school and be like, I'd hear something like a new band. Like, oh, here's REM. Who's REM? Well, here they are. You know, you like U2. I mean, all these bands that became huge, like Metallica a couple of years later, all these things that became so ubiquitous into the 90s. Like, I was there, right, like on the ground floor, so to speak.
Right.
So it's really hard. It's really hard.
The amount of time between, like you were saying, this late 70s, like Queen and Van Halen and all this stuff, about how much time between us and the 2000s, like the Matrix coming out in 99, that's about 30 years, let's just say, give or take. I mean, World War II there was a lot of change happening very quickly in the 70s and 80s and stuff. And it was happening, I mean, whether it's a post-psychedelic situation because so many people had turned on and the whole collective consciousness was vibrating in a different way. Media was changing so quickly. It was a very lightning in a bottle situation. And because of the internet, I mean, it's cool to have access to everything, but it's so diffuse at this point that there's probably a lot of novelty pockets. I mean, obviously. But it seems like, I don't even know, like Cheers or something, like the bar isn't the same, like what you're saying. And it seems like you're chasing the muse, I mean, or novelty, however you want to
chasing the dragon. It's more like it.
Yeah, right. So it's like wherever it's not, I mean, that's the double-edged sword of the cutting edge of novelty. It's like if you're not on that edge, it's not nearly as interesting. And the most synchronicity, the most bizarre high weirdness occurs in certain chapel perilous kind of pockets of reality. But it also, I mean, there's a price of admission for that. You might be ostracized by society. You might, you know, have to do psychedelics or fast for 40 days or whatever the fuck it is. Listen to a bunch of Cocteau albums backwards or whatever it is. So, I don't know. So you were saying X-Files is kind of where you're going now with the book.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like my summation, you know, this long obsession. Full disclosure, I've pretty almost crippling OCD. So, and it expresses itself in these obsessions, you know. So I'm a deeply obsessive personality, which I've learned to monetize. Let's just say, you know, I've made it work for me. I've made it work for me. But no, I mean, I fully understand that I'm a deeply obsessive personality. But the good thing is that I've had the fortune to pick the right things to obsess on, because something like the X-Files, I mean, I'm working on this book now. I've got stacks of books and magazines right next to me here. Some of which I hadn't even read fully. And I'm like learning new things. Like after 30 odd years, I'm still discovering new things. And I'll go back and watch these episodes. I'm like, oh, that's what that is. And, it's like something that's almost like evergreen, something that's always producing new experience. I mean, you're talking about over 200 episodes of television, which is like,
it's a plethora.
It's like watching 100 movies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you have this whole very deep and rich rabbit hole to descend into, and that's kind of like the things that have obsessed me are the things it's almost like, oh yeah, this Cocteau Twins thing, I really like this thing, I really like her voice and everything, and then you just realize that particular rabbit hole has no bottom. It like, I use the expression, it never ends, and it literally never ends. It's like it's constantly refreshing itself, it's constantly expressing itself, it's constantly writing itself onto our experiences, even though we don't realize it. And I've done kind of these large posts on the blog sort of cataloging all that so people can understand what I'm saying. But
how much of that do you think is intentional? Like with things, I mean, I'm guessing if you're into the X-Files, you probably watch Twin Peaks. So David Lynch, he was a Capricorn with an Aquarius moon, I think, or vice versa, I forget. Anyway, there's a really good 4 hour, if you've got 4 hours, there's like what Twin Peaks really means. And assuming you've watched season 1, 2, the movie and the return, it breaks it down, and it's like, it doesn't pop the balloon, but you start seeing things in such a way where it's like, you can't see it any other way. And it's like, I wonder, kind of like what you did with your writing and the X-Files people posted it. It's like, I don't know sometimes if people holding the flame know what they're doing to the highest level of like high magic, you know what I mean? Like they're just kind of channel vessels, and maybe the fumes you're huffing, they didn't even intend, but they're there.
Yeah. Well, I'm always really more interested in the things that get expressed unintentionally and unconsciously.
Right.
To be honest with you, like I find like when people put stuff in intentionally or too obviously intentionally, I find it really boring. Right. I'm really fascinated by the idea of these things emanating of their own accord. And, somebody like Lynch, who was so deeply involved with TM, transcendental meditation,
bled through for sure.
Yeah. I think that guy, he reached some levels of consciousness,
some samadhi, some awareness.
Yeah. That most of us never will. I think he's just one of those rare birds that somehow was able to tap into streams that we might have like an intellectual concept of, but we have no experience with. And I think he was there. And that's what fascinates me about his work. But it's also the power of dream. I mean, what he really started to do, starting with, I think Lost Highway would be the first expression of that, but he really wanted to put dream on film. No, actually Fire Walk With Me, I think would be when his work really changed. It was always weird and it was always surreal, but I think this impetus that he had to really translate the full immersive power of dream onto film. Like I said, I believe it starts with Fire Walk With Me. And, it's also very polarizing. I mean, a lot of people like violently hate his stuff. Like even people that you think have more of like an intellectual bent or what have you, artistic bent. I mean, there are a lot of people who really hate Twin Peaks, Fire Walk With Me, or hate, particularly stuff like Lost Highway and Inland Empire. I mean, even Mulholland Drive, which is sort of the most commercial, accessible expression of that impulse that he has. But
funny thing about Lost Highway, when I was in 4th grade, I walked into Target and I saw like, Smashing Pumpkins, Rammstein, like all these things. And I was like, I want that for my birthday. So my friend gave me the Lost Highway soundtrack, and I still haven't seen the fucking film, but I understand the concept about a Mobius and all this stuff. So, yeah, I haven't seen Inland Empire. We were going to start it the other day, my girlfriend and I, but we just didn't because we just binged all this Twin Peaks shit. You got to watch this YouTube thing. I mean, I wouldn't throw something your way if you've got some time. You'll never be the same. It's kind of it's fascinating. It's great. It's got like 5 million views or something. It's not like a small thing.
Please do send it to me. Yeah.
I'll post it in here somewhere, or yeah, I'll send it to you. What Twin Peaks really means? No, really. And I mean, I think he has some addendums or whatever, but he paces it kind of like you're saying, where it's like if people are Twin Peaks junkies, like they're kind of like, okay, I've thought about this, but by the end, it's getting so. I mean, it's like the most high level literalism is the best way I can put it. You just can't unsee it. I mean, it's like, yeah, there's no words to, it's like a drug trip kind of, but people tend to try to romanticize and kind of see, and it's not that it can't be there, because I've heard other interpretations of Twin Peaks where it's like very occult, very kind of surreal, whatever, but this is like every scene almost broken down, every character interaction, all dialogues, to the degree where it's like, it can't be anything else. This has to be what it is. Like, this has to be what it is. It's a very eye-opening moment. So if you're a David Lynch fan, anybody in here, check it out. You'd think I work for the fucking guy because I'm plugging it so hard, but it's like really, really. I made my girlfriend watch all of Twin Peaks, and I'm like, now we have to watch this because now you'll get it. Like, what did we just fucking watch? Like, what does it mean that there's lights flashing on their faces and all sorts of stuff? Like, it has a real tangible veritas to it. So I'd love to hear your opinion on it. We can start.
I please do. You know,
I'm gonna send it to you, bro. Yeah. I know. I geek out and tag you sometimes when I see quotes and stuff. I mean, I'm a little trickster, Sun and Moon Gemini. So I do stupid shit with memes and all that. That's what Team Rabbit Hole started as a meme page. But no, I really appreciate what you're up to. I'm gonna pay more attention to what you're up to. Even though we're obviously on a generational kind of schism where you're like the elder statesman, or like the senior in high school shaking your car keys, and I'm the freshman being like, I don't even know where the school is. I feel like you're a kindred, your soul family for sure. You're on the wave, and I appreciate that people like you have the balls and the creative ingenue. Like you're an artist, right? So it's like, and that takes many forms. But you're speaking in riddles, and I hope people pick up what you're putting down, because it's very accessible, and for what it is, good God. And also it's going to initiate people into their own journeys of internal exploration, essentially through symbol, myth, all these things, culture. I mean, whether it's true this chick is a Sybil and she's like channeling all this shit for the Cocteau Twins or not isn't even the point. Like, it's definitely what in a sense, it doesn't matter, but in another way, it's like, holy cow, the Wizard of Oz and Dark Side of the Moon go together. This was crazy. Like, how intentional is this? That kind of stuff. So I appreciate.
Well, let me just say this though. Yeah. I mean, this is something that I think about a lot, and it's kind of like, well, where is all this going? What's the point of all this? You know what I mean? Like, why bother?
It's like a Bill Hicks comment, right? It's like, well, what's the point of this? Enjoy the ride, right? And you're enjoying the ride. Well,
the point. So, not only did I hallucinate quite often when I was younger, but I also had like very intense, immersive, like almost holographic dreams. And I can see that, you know, certainly in people like Lynch. But we have like these two worlds that we live in. And most of us are barely conscious in either, right? We have dream and we have what we call waking reality. Now, I personally believe, you know, quite strongly that we need to integrate these two worlds. Okay. Well, first of all, people have to become much more conscious in their daily lives and in their dream work. But I really feel like we have to, the next step, like, I don't want to, you know, use loaded terms like evolution, but I think the next place that we can go is really integrating the interior and the exterior worlds, which is really what synchromysticism is all about. You know, when people ask me for like, what's your elevator pitch for synchromysticism, I say it's using the tools of dream interpretation on our external reality. Mm-hmm. Okay.
As within, so without.
Yeah. So to me, this ennui that we're feeling society-wide, this despair, this emptiness that is so endemic in our culture, and this is not an opinion. I mean, you hear this all the time, you know, particularly from younger people.
What's the point? Yeah,
they feel just dislocated. They feel unembodied in many ways. But there is also this very rich and immersive and quite frankly useful world, inside our heads, or at least that's how we experience it. I mean, that's how we experience everything, quite frankly. But there is this other reality that we can share and we can start to integrate into our waking reality, just as people like David Lynch did. And that's why, again, why I'm so fascinated by his work. And I do believe that his meditational skills were part of that. But I really strongly believe that power that you talk about, like, being around in the early 80s with, Van Halen and all these great movies and great comic books and whatever you want to mention. I think that people were a bit more in tune with their interior reality than they are today. And I think, there are a number of like physical reasons for this, like the chemicals and the pollution and, drugs and all these kind of things that are new that we didn't have back then, right? We didn't have all these pharmaceuticals back then. We didn't have 24/7 internet back then. I think we have turned over our dream power to other people, to other forces that do not have our best interests at heart. Do you understand what I'm saying? And I think we need to reclaim that. And it's a very difficult path to walk because people go, well, I'm just going to do a lot of hallucinogens. Well, that's not necessarily going to get you there. You know what I mean?
Correct.
That might take you on a totally different direction. The
Sid Barrett.
Yeah, exactly. The hallucinogens can take over. Acid casualties are a real thing. There are a number of different things that people create idols of, let's just say. And they boil everything down to this or that or this or that when they need to get all the horses hooked up to the carriage, so to speak, right? I mean, but I believe personally that it all starts with starting to integrate the inner reality, or what we call the inner reality, with that outer reality. And to me, mysticism is a very important part of that process because it's experiential. And to me, it's triggered when you reach those moments when you attain that sense of wholeness, you attain that sense of completion, right? Where the inner and the outer, or the upper and the lower, I mean, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't matter. These are just words. When these experiences really start to cohere, okay, where you really start to integrate them and feel them concurrently. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, the yin,
and
it's not just yin, it's not yang. You see the symbol, you understand it. Yeah.
So that to me is like, that's the next step. Like that's the next phase. And I'm spending a lot of time figuring out how I'm going to present this to people and make this something that they can participate in. One of the things I really want to do is a conference, but it has to be done.
Shit, I'll go do a conference.
Yeah, thank you. But so many people, the dopamine circuits in their brains are fried from too much social media, too many pharmaceuticals being used. There are so many roadblocks to this process that we need to not only learn how to overcome, but to share with others how we overcome them. Okay. But this, to me, it's like, it's not enough to just everything be bits and bytes and Zoom calls and StreamYard and YouTube and all the rest of it. I think it's great. Don't get me wrong. I think it's really great, but we have to take it we have to take it to the next level. We have to take it to the next step. And I think almost by definition, that is going to require physical proximity, tactility, right? Physical experience,
auric bonding,
like I said, smells like. So I go to the like there's a, what is it? Actually, where did I get those soaps? All right. So I went to this like health fair last fall. And I got these great soaps, like these great kind of like new age natural soaps, right?
Mhm.
And just showering, taking a shower and washing yourself up with these scents, right? And these herbs or whatever they are.
It's a kind of magic.
It
Yeah.
provides you with a different experience than just like, showering up with the ivory or the Irish Spring or something, I mean, it changes your experience.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that like our sensory input has been neglected as far as mystical experience goes. And it's something that we need to reintegrate into all this work that we're doing. It can't just be about rabbit holes and giant synchronicity,
Intellectual circle jerking. I got you.
yeah, it has to have a real world
Praxis.
application.
Yeah,
The theory has to have a practice, and that's really kind of what I feel myself being like dragged kicking and screaming towards. But it's really important because people are melting down, people are just burning out. There's a lot of mental health issues. I mean, there's just a lot of unwellness that I think comes from being disengaged from this deeper world that is accessible to all of us. You don't need magic, you don't need drugs or whatever. I mean,
every night we dream.
They don't hurt if if you know how to use them, but I'm saying you don't need them.
Mm-hmm.
This, just dreaming is accessible to all of us. If you start to just write down your dreams, you are going to have an epiphany. Believe me, you're going to start to see things differently if you write your dreams down every night or every morning or whatever. It's going to change your experience, and that's kind of where it's at. I mean, I see this need arising in so many different people, particularly people in our circles as well. Our brains, we don't have experience. The human animal has no experience with all this sensory input and all the rest of it, and all the EMF and all the 4G, 5G. I mean, all this electromagnetic.
It's a pressure cooker.
Yeah, I mean,
but we're going to turn it into diamons, man.
This is all brand new. I remember somebody had said several years ago, it's like we've been subjects in like the most extensive science experiment in human history. And I mean, look what's happening. There are a lot of people who just aren't doing well. And I think starting that healing process, that process towards wholeness, I think necessitates integrating, like, again, the inner and the outer. I mean, to me, that's the first step. It's a big step, but it's the first step.
I hear you 1,000%. I mean, there's a lot. We don't have to go into it now because we can start winding down. But depending on presuppositions, it's like these are the rapids, the waterfall of the zeitgeist, the river. And we've always been an experiment of consciousness through bipedalism and prefrontal cortexes and all sorts of stuff. I understand completely what you mean by, corporate media and constant barragement of technology and all this stuff. It's very different playhouse right now than it's ever been before. I mean, I don't know if Atlantis was a thing or not, but it's like, holy shit, like we're dealing with some high weirdness that is new. But if we can look at it as a privilege, in a sense, like Harry Potter, he had a hard road, man. It's not always easy, but he's a wizard, goddamn it. And even at the end, I mean, not to blow the whole thing, like, he's talking to Dumbledore and he's like, it was all in my head, basically, or not totally like a Narnia trip, but basically something like that. And he's like, what's not in your head? So, these are explorations. And you kind of said, you said a lot just then. So it's very, Queen of Cups stuff. We got to go with the flow. We got to get back into our intuition, essentially, in our feeling sensory reality. Technology is cool, but it's a tool. It shouldn't take us. We shouldn't lose our little sparks. Although what it means to be a human is changing. I guess my last kind of sentiments here, and we can give you a word, and Raphael can wrap us up. Not only are you very Team Rabbit Hole, clearly, like all your interests, your OG Team Rabbit Hole for sure. I'm just going to quote from our little cigarette smoking bodhisattva, David Lynch. Through the darkness of future past, the magician longs to see one chance out between two worlds. Fire, walk with me. That fire is spirit or consciousness, or we're walking between waking, life and lucidity of the dream. We don't even know where one begins and ends necessarily. It's really a privilege, if we can look at that, to be embarked on this journey. Like, I've heard a great quote once. It's like, we're embarked. Like, you're on the road. You can't get off this road. And maybe death doesn't even change that. We don't know about all that. But if we can kind of learn to have compassion for ourselves and others, know that we're all in the kettle that's boiling like little frogs or whatever, and to use that. I mean, that's when the great art comes. Like we were talking about Van Gogh. He wasn't pulling a Bono and just being egotistical. He did most of his shit in the madhouse,
or in obscurity.
Yeah. Beethoven lost his hearing. Some of his best music comes after that. So it's like, just because it's difficult doesn't mean we have to choose suffering. Like in a Buddhist sense, it's all hard. It's all suffering, but it's like, can we spin it and that's where the alchemical gold is, from shit to gold. That's what it is. So I don't know. I don't really have much else to say other than that. I really do appreciate you giving us your time and energy. I'm gonna hopefully, I'll send you that link to the Lynch thing, and
definitely,
I won't harass you, but you're cool. You're your tribe for sure. So I'll keep in touch. Any last, this doesn't have to be your gravestone epitaph or anything, but any last sentiment or whatever.
Well,
thing.
before you go, I wasn't commenting much because I'm woefully uneducated on much of the pop culture that you're referencing, even though I'm peripherally aware that there is a ton of synchromysticism with David Lynch and all that. We discussed about some of those things. But what I can glean is you and also Jim, I know, both like good art direction and music and storytelling, and even some of the themes that you talked about now may be reflected in the recent, of all things, a video game. If you haven't stumbled across it yet, it is called Clair Obscur Expedition 33, and it has quite a few themes. I mean, first of all, the music is wonderful, the gameplay is interesting, the graphics for a game actually is decent, and so whether you approach it from the music angle or the storytelling and the world building, it may be something that you enjoy. And what's also interesting is that it's not a rehash of anything, but it's actually, from what I can tell, a completely new story that also touches on this very idea, without spoiling too much, of what is real, what is, let's just say, within the painting. Yeah, maybe it's something you enjoy, even if it's just the music. So just wanted to let you know.
I'll check that out. I mean, I don't play much games anymore, but video games can be just like comic books, windows into this other thing. Good Final Fantasy VII, whatever. Like, good games are good games. One thing I'll say, and I'll shut the fuck up because I said so. If you've ever seen the movie Waking Life, I think it's a Richard Linklater movie. Really solid film. It's a philosophical vignette thing. That and The Big Lebowski were the only two movies I owned in high school, but really solid. But the whole point of that thing is like, dream is destiny, and Queen of Cups card indeed. It's like, we're walking on a dream, and it feels very real. Like Bill Hicks, it's like, thrills and spills and all that stuff. And just engage with it well, guys. Engage with it well. That might look different for everybody's personal beliefs and definitions, but the more participatory and the more engaged and the more excited you can be about life, the better the fucking alchemical results, I guarantee. Anyway, Chris, any last thought?
Yeah, one thing I would like to say, and what you just said sort of inspired it. No, I'm not sure why, but there's this kind of notion, and I don't know exactly where it came from, but you can sort of reach a certain pinnacle or a certain height, and then you can just coast. So if you're interested, say, in like, this kind of material that we're discussing, you can sort of just get into it, and then you can just say, all right, well, whatever.
Rest on your laurels or something.
I think that, immersion is really important.
Like participation. Yeah.
Participation, and also repetition. Repetition is a mother of skill. So going, I'm lucky because I have OCD. It's kind of a weird thing to say, but I'll go over the same things countless numbers of times until I find what I'm looking for. But you can't, you don't like achieve Satori and then just go watch football games or something, and just leave those pursuits behind. It's an endless process. it's a perpetual process. It's a lifetime commitment.
It's a lifestyle, not a hobby.
Yeah. So like
Yeah,
if you're interested in mysticism and related topics, why is this camera just moving?
I don't know, but I love it. It's like
like
ghost
a
mode. Yeah.
You really need to do it every day, right?
Mhm.
Or do it regularly. It's kind of like exercise. You can't just like exercise and just say, okay, I'm in shape, because you're going to fall back out of shape. And it's the same thing with these kind of more elusive mystical pursuits. You know, there isn't a point that you can reach and you can just sort of stop. It's something, it's like exercise. You have to exercise every day, and you have to sort of immerse yourself in these topics every day, because there are certain cases where you have a certain tool set that you're not quite sure how to use, and it can sort of lead you in bad directions, you know, black magic and things like that. So I think that sticking at it, even if you feel like you've realized or achieved your goals or whatever, stay in it. And like I said, this whole thing that I want to create, I don't know if I can create it, but help create or help inspire a culture that is about embodiment, that is about proximity, that is about physicality, and not just endless blog postings,
Pontifications.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we need to get back to the body. You know, when you talk about like punk rock and everything like that, I mean, yeah, I mean, most of the music was just god awful, but it was intensely physical, right? It was very much like a rite of passage kind of thing, you know. And it did change me. It changed me physically. I became like much tougher, let's just say. And it was very embodied. It was maybe a little too embodied. Right?
Well, like a reaction to prog rock, right? Genesis and Yes are doing these like 40-minute songs.
Yeah, well, exactly. But
they're like,
you know,
let's just do 2 chords loud.
But you know, but there's something to be said for that too. But we've lost like the internet, I think, is in so many ways has taken the human away from us, and we need to reclaim the human. It's just basically,
if you watch the new
what I have to
Mirror
say.
stuff, yeah, reclaim the fire that we're walking. We are that fire. That's why I quoted that thing. You get it, dude. You're saying it. Black Mirror, if you haven't seen it, check that shit out. It's like the Twilight Zone modernized. It's crazy. But yeah, we're losing something, but hopefully we'll get something. Law of equivalence. I don't know. I'm hopeful. All right, gentlemen. I know you have dogs to deal with, and Raphael is patiently probably ready to pull the trigger on this. So once again, thank you so much for your time and energy. You're dope in my book, and yeah, hopefully our paths cross in the near future in the IRL in real life. If you host a thing, let me know, because I'll totally should go.
Absolutely.
Word. All right.
Thank you very much for joining, Chris. Thank you, Jim, as always, and thanks everyone for listening. It was very enjoyable to listen to all your stories and your experiences, and wishing you all the best. Thank you, Jim. Thanks everyone in chat, and catch you all next time. Thank you.